Nice patch, Grandpa. Did the museum forget to lock its display case? So what does it prove?
Nothing about me. A promise to others.
May I photograph it for our club president?
One photograph, no social media.
The president said do not let him leave. Over a patch? My father photographed that lantern in 1979. Who is he?
15 minutes earlier, the answer had been hiding beneath one nearly invisible blue thread. The man the club president would soon race to meet had arrived at the Iron Ridge Roadhouse without seeking an audience. Yet the detail that had drained the president's face was already sewn high on Bill's left shoulder, where one hidden thread would soon matter more than every polished pin in the lot. William Carter, known to most people as Bill, was 82, lean rather than frail, with neatly combed silver hair, pale blue eyes, and the upright posture of a man who had spent 6 years in an Army motor pool before building a civilian career repairing long-haul trucks. It was the first Saturday in August, and the fictional motorcycle club was preparing for its annual county scholarship ride beside Interstate 70. Volunteers carried bottled water toward the porch, a local band tested speakers inside, and smoked brisket drifted through the open windows while sunlight flashed across parked motorcycles. Bill had stopped only long enough to secure the latch on his weathered black touring motorcycle before the gathering turned its attention toward him. He wore clean boots, dark jeans, and a faded denim vest with no military ribbons or club colors. The only unusual object was a small patch high on his left shoulder, an amber lantern above a narrow gray road, with 6 pale stitches crossing the bottom like short lane markers. There was no name, rank, rocker, territory, or unit. Rain and sunlight had softened the cloth until the design looked almost unfinished, but the uneven border and repaired upper corner showed age rather than imitation. Beneath that repair, one nearly invisible blue thread had been sewn into the backing where a casual observer would never notice it. The younger rider who had challenged Bill was 24 and the newest full member of the club. He had spent a year volunteering, polishing every pin on his black leather vest that morning because he wanted the older members to see that he belonged. Making his friends react had become his quickest way to hide how often he still wondered whether they respected him. Bill recognized the insecurity without excusing the behavior it produced. He neither raised his voice nor offered a resume. Instead, he protected the meaning of the patch and refused to let curiosity become ownership. That restraint unsettled the younger rider more than anger would have, because it left him without the public argument he had expected to win. The club's road captain watched from near the fuel pumps. He had seen hundreds of military, memorial, charity, and motorcycle emblems, and the lantern matched none of them. More important, it did not imitate recognized club colors or claim membership. Its hand-stitching, crooked road, and repaired corner suggested that someone had made it for a reason strangers were never meant to evaluate at a glance. Through the roadhouse window, the longtime manager watched Bill with concern, but no surprise, as though his presence on that particular Saturday meant something the riders had missed. Bill placed his cap beneath one arm and headed toward the porch, leaving the younger men to decide whether they would follow him inside or let the moment end. The road captain looked once more at the lantern and its 6 fading marks. Somewhere in his memory, he had seen that arrangement before, not on a jacket, but in the corner of an old photograph the club president kept locked inside a cedar box. Inside the Iron Ridge Roadhouse, ceiling fans moved cool air through a dining room lined with county maps, antique license plates, and framed photographs from decades of local rides. Bill selected the booth nearest the front window and set his cap beside him. Linda Morales approached before he opened the menu. At 63, she had managed the roadhouse long enough to remember customers by the sound of their motorcycles. "First Saturday in August," she said with a warm smile. "Sweet tea and pecan pie?" Bill returned the smile. "You have a better memory than I do. You have stopped here on this date for 14 years. That gives me an unfair advantage." She poured his tea and lowered her voice. "Everything all right outside?" Bill glanced through the window. Tyler was speaking animatedly to the same 3 riders, while Ethan stood apart from them. "A young man is trying to decide what kind of man he wants to become," Bill said. "That can be noisy work." Linda followed his gaze and understood enough not to ask more. She placed a slice of pie before him and moved toward another table. Outside, Tyler had begun retelling the exchange as though he had won it. No club, no unit, no explanation, he said. Anyone could sew a lantern onto denim and invent a sad story. One friend nodded, but another studied the window. He did not invent a story. He barely told us anything. Tyler disliked the distinction. The old man's composure had taken control of the moment without asking permission, and Tyler wanted that control back. Ethan walked over. "Let it go." Tyler turned. "You think it is real?" "I think he told you not to turn it into a joke." "That does not answer the question. Not every question belongs to you." Tyler gave him an incredulous look. "You are the road captain. You should care if somebody walks into a club event wearing fake colors." Ethan looked through the glass at the patch. "Those are not club colors. There is no top rocker, bottom rocker, territory, or club name. He is not claiming membership." That practical answer should have ended the argument. Instead, Tyler heard it as another challenge. He headed for the entrance and his friends followed more slowly. Ethan hesitated, then went inside as well. The bell above the door rang as Tyler crossed the room and stopped beside Bill's booth. Nearby conversations softened. Bill cut a small piece of pie, ate it, and waited. Tyler pointed toward the empty seat across from him. "May I sit down?" "If you plan to ask instead of perform." A few older riders lowered their eyes to hide brief smiles. Tyler sat. His friends remained behind him. Ethan stood near the end of the booth where he could intervene without making a scene. "You said the patch was a promise," Tyler began. "A promise to whom?" Bill rested his fork beside the plate. "People whose names mattered more than the men carrying them." "What does that mean?" "It means the patch is not a resume." Tyler leaned back. "That sounds like another way to avoid an answer." Bill's gaze remained steady. "You are not owed a private history because you noticed an old piece of cloth." The words were firmer than anything he had said outside. They carried no threat, but they established a boundary everyone could understand. Tyler's cheeks colored. Ethan stepped forward before the younger man could answer. "Sir, may I ask one thing?" Bill nodded. Ethan indicated the patch without reaching toward it. "Would you allow me to photograph it and send the picture to our club president? He keeps the local riding archives. If he does not recognize it, I will leave the matter alone." Bill considered the request. "You asked before reaching for your phone. That already makes it a different question." Ethan waited. After a moment, Bill turned his shoulder slightly toward the window, allowing the afternoon light to fall across the lantern. "One photograph," he said. "No social media. You have my word." Ethan took a clear picture, showed the screen to Bill, and sent it directly to Jack Sullivan with the location beneath it. Tyler folded his arms, expecting a long wait or a dismissive reply. Ethan's phone vibrated before he could return it to his pocket. The message contained only 5 words. "Do not let him leave." Ethan read the message twice. Jack Sullivan was not a man who exaggerated. At 59, the president of the Iron Ridge Motorcycle Club had spent 4 decades organizing safe rides, raising money for local schools, and reminding younger members that club colors were a responsibility rather than a costume. He was currently 3 miles away at the clubhouse finishing route assignments. On meeting days, he ignored nearly every call until the work was done. Yet he had answered a photograph in less than 30 seconds. Tyler noticed Ethan's expression. "What did he say?" Ethan locked the phone. "He is coming." "That is all?" "That is enough." Tyler tried to laugh, but no one joined him. Bill lifted his tea and looked toward the highway, as if the news confirmed something he had expected, without telling him exactly what. Ethan's phone rang. He stepped several feet away and answered quietly. Jack did not offer a greeting. "Describe the patch." Ethan looked toward Bill's shoulder. Faded amber lantern, gray road underneath, 6 light stitches across the bottom. Upper left corner repaired with darker thread. A pause followed. Ethan heard a drawer open on the other end, then the soft movement of papers. "Is there a narrow blue stitch inside the repaired corner?" Jack asked. Ethan moved closer but kept a respectful distance. Bill noticed and turned the patch toward him. Beneath the darker repair was a nearly invisible line of blue thread. "Yes," Jack exhaled. "Then it may be one of the 6. Ethan glanced at Tyler, who could not hear the words but understood from Ethan's face that the conversation had changed. "6 what?" Ethan asked. "I will explain in person. Until I arrive, keep the room calm. Do not let anyone touch it, copy it, or turn this into a spectacle. Who is he? If the photograph in front of me is labeled correctly, his name may be William Carter. Ethan looked at the old man. Linda had addressed him as Mr. Carter, but Ethan had not heard his first name. That is his name. Silence filled the line. When Jack spoke again, his voice had lost its usual command. I am bringing the photograph. The call ended. Across town, Jack stood alone in the clubhouse office with an old cedar box open on his desk. Inside lay route maps, his father's pocket knife, and a black and white photograph protected by a clear sleeve. 6 men in worn riding jackets stood beside heavily loaded motorcycles outside a service station in 1979. Each jacket carried the same small lantern patch. A 12-year-old boy stood at the edge of the photograph beside a tall mechanic in coveralls. The boy was Jack. The mechanic was his father, Samuel Sullivan. On the back, Samuel had written 6 names in blue ink. The 5th was William Carter. Jack slid the photograph into a rigid folder, closed the box, and reached for his helmet. At the roadhouse, Tyler continued searching for a way to recover his confidence. Maybe Jack just recognizes an old charity patch, he said. That does not make Grandpa some kind of legend. Bill placed his glass on the table. Young man, I have not called myself anything. But you are letting everyone else make it dramatic. Bill's expression changed slightly. The patience remained, but it was no longer passive. I let one respectful man take one photograph. You are responsible for the drama you brought into this room. Tyler opened his mouth, then stopped. Ethan moved between the booth and the younger riders. Enough, Tyler. Jack asked us to keep the room calm. You are taking orders from a photograph now? I am honoring a guest who set a reasonable boundary. The correction came publicly, but Ethan kept his voice level. Tyler looked around and realized that even his friends had stepped away from him. For the first time that afternoon, the consequence was not mysterious. He had mistaken an audience for support. Bill gave Ethan a small nod and returned to his pie. Outside, a motorcycle engine started in the distance. Jack Sullivan placed the cedar box's key in his pocket, secured the old photograph inside his jacket, and turned toward the road that his father had once described as the beginning of a promise. The wait lasted less than 15 minutes, but it changed the room. Volunteers continued arranging registration forms for the next morning's scholarship ride. Linda refilled glasses. The band stopped at sound check, leaving only the ceiling fans and the occasional passing truck beyond the windows. Tyler moved to an empty table with his friends. He no longer joked, yet pride kept him from leaving. Ethan remained close enough to the booth to be helpful without hovering. Bill ate slowly, apparently more interested in the pie than the attention surrounding him. After several minutes, Ethan asked, "Did you know Jack's father?" Bill looked at him. "I have known many fathers. Jack said he was bringing an old photograph." A faint recognition passed through Bill's eyes, followed by caution. "Then, the photograph belongs to him. Let him tell you why." Ethan accepted the answer. That restraint made Tyler more curious than a dramatic confession would have. He studied the patch from across the room. Now that he understood it was not club insignia, he noticed details he had mocked before. The lantern was not symmetrical. The road bent slightly to the right. The 6 bottom stitches differed in length, and the dark repair protected one strand of blue thread. Nothing looked mass-produced. Someone had made it by hand and expected the wearer to understand imperfections that strangers could not. Linda placed the check beside Bill's plate, but he covered it with his hand. "Not yet," he said. "I may need another tea." "You can have the whole picture." She glanced at Tyler, then lowered her voice. "You do not have to stay for this." Bill looked toward the young rider. Leaving would teach him that patience ends when a room becomes uncomfortable. Linda gave him a thoughtful smile. "Still teaching people who never enrolled?" "Only when they insist on attending." Ethan heard the exchange and almost laughed, but Bill's eyes remained kind. The humor was not designed to humiliate Tyler. It simply acknowledged the situation honestly. One of Tyler's friends quietly deleted the short video he had started recording outside. Another turned his phone face down on the table. Neither action was announced, but Tyler noticed both. The audience he had tried to impress was beginning to make better decisions without waiting for him. Tyler stood and approached again, this time stopping several feet from the booth. "Mr. Carter?" Bill turned toward him. "I should not have called you Grandpa." "No, you should not have." The direct answer surprised him. "I thought you were going to say it did not matter." "It mattered when you said it. What matters next is what you do after understanding that." Tyler nodded once, uncertain whether he had been forgiven. Bill did not rush to relieve him. An apology offered only to escape discomfort was not yet growth. "Is there something I can do now?" Tyler asked. Bill glanced toward the deleted recording and the face-down phone. "You can wait without demanding that the next answer make you comfortable." Tyler returned to his table without another word. Ethan checked the highway. "Jack should be here soon." Bill looked down at the patch, and the dining room dissolved for a moment into a road almost 5 decades earlier. In the summer of 1978, Bill had been 34 and 7 years removed from military service. He worked nights repairing diesel engines and spent weekends helping former service members fix whatever their limited paychecks could keep on the road. 5 friends from different transport and maintenance assignments had returned home, carrying sealed letters, photographs, watches, and small personal effects entrusted to them by men who had never delivered those things themselves. Government channels had returned official property. The 6 friends believed the private promises were theirs to complete. Before leaving, they verified every address by telephone or letter and contacted each household privately. Anyone who declined a visit received the packet by registered mail with no unexpected rider appearing at the door. The men wanted to keep promises, not force families to reopen memories for strangers. They planned a 5-state route, loaded 21 carefully labeled packets into waterproof bags, and left before sunrise on the first Saturday in August. They called it the Lantern Run, because one rider carried an amber camping lantern that marked their table at every overnight stop. There were no sponsors, reporters, matching jackets, or public ceremonies. They paid for fuel themselves, slept in inexpensive motels, and recorded every delivery on a folded route card. At each address, they introduced themselves, delivered what had been entrusted to them, listened as long as the family wished to speak, and left without asking to be remembered. The first mother they visited, Eleanor Price, noticed the lantern on their table. Months later, she mailed 6 hand-sewn patches made from a retired canvas mailbag. Each showed the lantern, the road, and 6 stitches for the riders who had kept their word. One blue thread ran behind the upper corner, where only the wearer could see it. Her note said, the blue line represented the people waiting at home. She asked them not to sell, reproduce, or formally name the emblem. It was gratitude, not membership. In 1979, the 6 men rode the route again, wearing the patches. Near midnight outside the building that would later become the Iron Ridge Roadhouse, one motorcycle lost its drive chain. A mechanic named Samuel Sullivan opened his closed service bay, repaired it without charge, made coffee, and listened to their story. Before they left, he asked permission to take one photograph. Bill remembered a skinny 12-year-old boy standing beside Samuel, watching the 6 riders as if they had arrived from another world. The memory faded when a deep touring engine rolled into the parking lot. Bill turned toward the window. Jack Sullivan had arrived, carrying the only photograph Bill had not seen since 1979. A black touring motorcycle crossed the gravel at walking speed and stopped beside the porch. Jack Sullivan switched off the engine, removed his gloves, and sat still for one breath before reaching inside his jacket to check the rigid folder. Through the front window, his eyes moved across the dining room until they found Bill. Then they fixed on the faded lantern. Jack's posture changed. The certainty with which he usually entered a club gathering gave way to something quieter and far more personal. He removed his helmet and walked toward the door. Tyler stood, expecting Jack to confirm whatever rumor had begun. Ethan stepped aside. Linda stopped behind the counter with the tea pitcher in her hand. The bell above the entrance sounded once. Jack entered, took 2 steps, and saw the blue thread inside the repaired corner. The color left his face. He did not look frightened. He looked like a man watching a childhood memory step out of a cedar box and take a seat beneath the afternoon sun. "William Carter?" he asked. Bill rose from the booth. "Jack Sullivan?" Jack swallowed and nodded. "Samuel's son." Bill studied the gray at Jack's temples and the lines around his eyes. "You were 12. You held the flashlight while your father repaired Daniel Morris's chain." Jack stared at him. That detail had never appeared in the note behind the photograph. "You remember me?" Your father said you would become a mechanic if he could keep you away from motorcycles. A small, unsteady laugh escaped Jack. He failed at the second part. He usually did, where motorcycles were concerned. The room relaxed for half a second, then grew quiet again as Jack removed the rigid folder from his jacket. He placed it on the table and opened it carefully. The black and white photograph showed 6 younger men beside loaded motorcycles under the old Sullivan service sign. The building behind them was unmistakably the original front half of the roadhouse. Every rider wore the same lantern patch. At the edge stood Samuel in stained coveralls and 12-year-old Jack holding a flashlight. Tyler moved closer but stopped outside Bill's reach. The evidence required no dramatic explanation. The younger face of William Carter carried the same narrow jaw, steady eyes, and slight tilt of the head. His patch looked new, its amber lantern bright against dark cloth. Jack pointed to the 5th handwritten name on the back of the protective sleeve. "My father wrote this the night you left." Bill read the familiar blue ink. William Carter, Daniel Morris, Frank Hale, Robert Ellis, Joseph Lane, and Marcus Webb. 3 names carried small dates Samuel had added many years later. Bill's expression softened, but he did not turn the moment into public grief. He touched the outside of the sleeve with one fingertip. "Your father kept them together. He kept everything connected to that night." Jack turned the photograph over. Beneath the names was a sentence written in the same blue ink. 6 riders carried 21 promises home. Ask what they carried before asking what they earned. No one spoke. Tyler looked at the words, then at his own spotless vest. Every patch he wore announced something other people could recognize immediately. Bill's patch had never been designed to announce anything. Jack looked toward the lantern. "My father told me only 6 were made. That is true. How many are still being worn?" Bill paused. "One that I know of." Jack's face tightened. The answer explained why he had reacted before knowing anything else. He was not looking at a rare collectible. He was looking at the surviving evidence of a private duty that had outlived 5 of the men who began it. Tyler lowered his eyes. Jack did not scold him. He simply returned the photograph to the table and asked Bill the question his father had instructed him to ask if this day ever came. "What are you still carrying?" Bill reached into the inside pocket of his denim vest and withdrew a folded route card protected by clear plastic. 21 surnames had been typed in 2 columns. Beside each was a date, and beside every date was a small check mark. At the bottom, 1 blank line remained. Bill laid the route card beside Samuel Sullivan's photograph. The final blank line did not carry a family name. It read, "Sullivan Service, Iron Ridge," with the current date left open. Jack looked from the card to Bill. "My father was part of the route. Not the original deliveries," Bill said. "He became part of what kept them moving." In 1979, Samuel had repaired Daniel's chain, fed 6 exhausted riders, and refused payment. More importantly, he had understood why they did not want publicity. Every first Saturday in August after that, he left the service bay light on until midnight in case the lantern run passed through. Some years all 6 riders arrived. Other years work, illness, weather, or family obligations reduced the number. Samuel never asked them to explain their absences. He served coffee, inspected the motorcycles, and recorded each visit on the back of the photograph. After his death, the old service station changed owners, became a cafe, and eventually grew into the Iron Ridge Roadhouse. Bill continued stopping because a promise could include the people who helped carry it. "I came to mark your father's stop one final time," Bill said. "The original route ends today." Jack's eyes moved to the unchecked line. "Why today?" "Daniel died in January. He was the last rider besides me. We agreed that when only one remained, the route would no longer pretend to be a reunion." The statement was sad, but not sentimental. Bill did not ask the room to mourn men they had never known. He simply told the truth. "The families received their packets decades ago," he continued. "After that, the ride became a way to visit the people who helped us keep our word. Most of those people are gone now. Your father was the final stop still waiting to be acknowledged by his family." Jack pulled out the empty chair and sat across from Bill. Club presidents, volunteers, and younger riders disappeared from his attention. For that moment, he was Samuel's son. "He talked about that night every August," Jack said. "He never gave me the names until I was old enough to understand why they were private." Bill nodded. He protected the story without trying to own it. Tyler listened from several feet away. The phrase landed uncomfortably close to his own behavior. He had treated the patch as an object that owed him an explanation. Samuel Sullivan had held the entire story for decades and never used it to make himself important. Jack turned toward the room. The patch was never military insignia or motorcycle club colors, he explained. It conferred no rank, territory, or authority. A woman named Eleanor Price made 6 of them from a canvas mailbag after 6 former service members personally delivered 21 private packets across 5 states. My father met them on their 2nd annual ride and preserved the only known photograph. Bill added, Eleanor chose the lantern because we kept setting it on motel tables while we checked the next day's route. She chose 6 road marks because there were 6 riders. The blue thread was for everyone waiting at home. Tyler finally saw the patch without the story he had projected onto it. The crooked stitches were not evidence of poor workmanship. They were the movements of a grieving mother sewing gratitude into material already worn by travel. The fading did not diminish the design. It documented 47 years of weather, fuel stops, summer heat, and first Saturdays. Jack slid the route card toward Bill. How do we mark the final stop? Bill handed him a blue pen. Your father used blue. Jack held the pen above the blank line, but his hand stopped. This feels like something you should do. Bill shook his head. I carried it here. You received it. Both parts matter. Jack wrote the date carefully and placed a check beside Sullivan's service. When he finished, Bill removed the old patch from beneath his vest collar, just enough to reveal the hidden blue thread. That is all the ceremony there ever was, he said. A name delivered, a person heard, and a mark made by the right hand. Jack capped the pen. Tyler stared at the checked line and realized the afternoon had not been waiting for a legend to reveal himself. It had been waiting for a son to complete his father's part of a promise. Linda brought a fresh glass of tea for Bill and a cup of coffee for Jack without asking. Jack thanked her, then turned the old photograph so the room could see it while keeping the handwritten names beneath the protective sleeve. These names stay private unless Mr. Carter says otherwise, he told the club. The instruction was not about secrecy for its own sake. It prevented the riders from turning someone else's grief into decoration. Ethan nodded first. Several others followed. Tyler remained near the table, his hands open at his sides. He had removed the grin that had functioned like armor all afternoon, but he had not yet found words strong enough to replace it. Bill noticed. You wanted to know what the patch proved, he said. Tyler looked up. I was wrong. That is an answer to a different question. Tyler took a breath. It proved nothing about you because it was never supposed to. It reminded you what you promised other people. Bill gave the smallest nod. Now you are listening. Tyler stepped closer but did not enter the space beside the booth until Bill indicated the empty area with one hand. Mr. Carter, I am sorry. I mocked your age, your clothes, and something I did not understand because I wanted everyone to think I belonged here. The admission was more honest than the quick apology he had attempted earlier. I made you into a joke, so I would not look uncertain. Bill did not rescue him from the discomfort. And what will you do with that understanding? Tyler glanced toward the 3 friends who had laughed with him. The next time someone arrives, I will ask who they are before deciding what they are worth. Better, Bill said. But remember that some people will not owe you their story even after you ask. Tyler nodded. Then I will respect the answer. That was the point Bill had been waiting to hear. An apology does not erase an afternoon, he said. It can change the next one. Tyler held out his hand. Bill looked at it briefly before accepting. The handshake was neither a public absolution nor a punishment. It was an agreement that the lesson would be tested later, when no mysterious patch or club president was present. Jack watched the exchange, then removed a small metal iron ridge pin from an inside pocket. We present this to people whose character changes the direction of our club, he said. I would be honored if you accepted it. Bill studied the pin. It belongs to your club. That is why I am offering it. Bill gently closed Jack's fingers around the metal. Then wear it while you teach your members what your father taught you. It will do more work there than in my saddlebag. Jack accepted the refusal without pressing. What would you accept from us? Bill looked around the room at the scholarship forms, safety maps, and cases of water prepared for the next morning. Keep your ride safe. Help the young people whose names are on those applications. And when an older rider stops alone, offer water before asking what he has earned. A soft murmur of agreement moved through the room. Ethan picked up the registration clipboard. We can add a hospitality station at the fuel stop, water, basic tools, and a place to sit for anyone passing through. Bill raised one eyebrow. You do not need to name it after 6 men. We will not, Ethan said. We will simply do it. That answer pleased him. Linda appeared with a small paper bag. Pecan pie for the road. Bill smiled. You have been doing that for years. And you have been pretending to object for years. Gentle laughter crossed the room, this time shared rather than aimed. Tyler moved toward the door before Bill reached it and opened it without announcing the gesture. Warm sunlight spread across the floorboards. Bill paused beside him. Tomorrow's ride will tell me more about you than today's apology. Tyler met his eyes. Then I will be at the water station before anyone else. Bill placed his cap on his silver hair and stepped onto the porch. Behind him, Jack carefully returned the photograph to its folder. The patch had finally been recognized, but the harder question remained open whether the people who had witnessed its meaning would carry anything forward after Bill rode away. Bill crossed the porch and walked toward his motorcycle while the riders followed at a respectful distance. No one surrounded him. No one raised a phone. Ethan had already asked one man to lower his camera, and the man complied without argument. Bill secured Linda's paper bag in the saddlebag, checked the straps, and ran one practiced hand across the rear tire. The movements were ordinary, which made the afternoon feel more honest. A promise that had lasted 48 years did not require a stage. Jack stood near the edge of the gravel with Samuel's photograph protected beneath one arm. Mr. Carter, he said, may I make a copy for the clubhouse archive? Bill considered the request. One copy. Keep the handwritten side private. What may we put beneath it? The year and the place. Nothing about heroes, Jack nodded. 1979, Sullivan's Service. That is enough. Tyler stood beside Ethan, listening to a conversation he would once have interrupted. Bill fastened his helmet and looked at the young rider. What time is the scholarship ride briefing? Tyler answered immediately. 7 tomorrow morning. Then your first chance arrives early. Tyler accepted the challenge. I will be there at 6:30. Bill started the engine. Its deep, even rhythm settled across the parking lot. Jack removed his cap. Ethan followed, then Tyler and the others did the same. Not as a formal salute, and not because anyone ordered them, but because silence was the most fitting response they could offer. Bill acknowledged them with a nod and eased onto the county road. The old touring motorcycle passed the former service bay, crossed beneath the roadhouse sign, and turned west toward fields bright with late afternoon sun. The edge of his denim vest moved in the warm air, revealing the lantern for one final second before the road curved beyond the trees. No one spoke until the engine could no longer be heard. Linda returned inside and began clearing the booth. Jack placed the route card beside the photograph and studied the final blue check mark. My father waited his whole life to know whether that ride continued, he said. Today, he received his answer. Ethan looked toward Tyler. And what answer did we give? Tyler understood that the question was not rhetorical. We laughed before we listened. That was the first answer, Ethan said. Tomorrow is the second. At 6:20 the following morning, Tyler arrived at the scholarship ride wearing work gloves instead of his polished club vest. He filled coolers, set folding chairs beneath a canopy, and helped an elderly couple tighten a loose luggage strap, without asking where they had ridden or what patches they wore. When a quiet man on an aging motorcycle stopped near the edge of the lot, Tyler carried him a bottle of water before asking his name. Ethan noticed but offered no praise. The change mattered because Tyler chose it without an audience. Over the following months, the club adopted no Lantern Run emblem and sold no commemorative merchandise. Jack refused every suggestion to reproduce the patch. Instead, he placed the approved copy of Samuel's photograph in a plain wooden frame near the clubhouse entrance. The caption read only, Sullivan Service, 1979. Ask before you judge. The reverse side remained covered. New members were told that the people in the photograph had carried private promises, and had never asked the club to borrow their history. The lesson was not that every unknown patch concealed a remarkable story. It was that no stranger had to possess a remarkable story to deserve basic respect. Tyler became the person who explained that distinction most often. Every first Saturday in August, Linda set aside a slice of pecan pie shortly before noon. Some years Bill's motorcycle appeared at the edge of the parking lot. Other years a storm, a doctor's appointment, or a longer route kept him away. Linda wrapped the pie at closing and took it home, never treating absence as tragedy. Jack wrote Bill twice each year and sent photographs of the scholarship recipients, the hospitality station, and the riders it had helped. Bill answered with brief notes that mentioned people rather than achievements. The lantern patch remained on his shoulder. He did not retire it after the final route because the promise had never been limited to a map. It lived whenever a name was carried carefully, whenever a story was heard without being claimed, and whenever someone chose humility before recognition. Years later, Tyler would remember the embarrassment of that first afternoon, but he would remember Bill's restraint more clearly. The old rider had possessed every reason to expose Tyler publicly, and had chosen instead to demand something harder, growth after the crowd disappeared. That was why the patch silenced the room. Its power did not come from rank, danger, or fame. It came from 21 private obligations completed without applause and 6 riders who understood that honor is not what a symbol announces. Honor is what a person continues to carry when nobody recognizes it. Was Tyler's apology enough, or did his next morning prove what real change requires? If this story stayed with you, like and share it with someone who values respect.